Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you're calling in from. We're glad to have you here for the final installment of Music Biz's Fall 2025 Common Ground webinar series. My name is Henrik Bick. I'm here with the Music Biz team. Glad to welcome you to today's session. Before we introduce today's presenters, I just have a couple of quick notes on how to make the most out of your webinar experience today. First and foremost, if you'd like to network with your fellow attendees and today's presenters, be sure to use the Zoom chat bar and change your chat settings to everyone so that way folks on the call today can see your messages. We're going to be running Q&A at the end of today's webinar today, but if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, be sure to drop them in the dedicated Q&A dashboard on your Zoom screen. You'll click the Q&A button at the bottom of your dashboard. That'll pull up a separate window to submit your questions, and it's the best way to make sure they make it to today's presenters. And like I said, we'll be answering everybody's questions at the end of the presentation today. And as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and added to our archives at the end of day today. Be sure to visit our website, musicbiz.org, to find that. We dropped that link in the chat for you earlier, but there's also a couple of places you can find it. When you're on the homepage of musicbiz.org, you can navigate to events and the virtual event recording archive at the bottom of that tab. From there, you can find all of our virtual event recordings from all of our different series. If you're looking for just the Common Ground webinar series backlog, navigate to the Educate tab and click on Common Ground webinar series. A couple of other events coming up from Music Biz that I want to just make note of. This is the final Common Ground webinar series, but we do have one more free webinar coming up next Wednesday, December 10th. That'll be with Deezer's Maria Garrido. She's going to be talking about the study that Deezer and Ipsos put out about consumer sentiments around generative AI music. We're excited to have her in conversation with Music Biz President Portia Sabin, as I said, next Wednesday. It's free to attend. Be sure to check it out. And you can register for that by visiting musicbiz.org and clicking the link on our homepage. While you're there, you can also find the latest episode of our Future of What podcast and check out all of the other episodes we've published in 2025. And then while you're there, you also see our slate of early events for 2026. Kicking things off, we have the Trust and Safety in Music Symposium, which is happening Monday, January 12th at NYU. Earlier this week, if you're on our email list, you received a message about our roundtable sessions. We just confirmed 6 of the 8 roundtables that'll be taking place during the event. And it's a great way for the folks in the room to make the conversations in that event around how we make a safer industry for both those who work in it and those who consume the music that we all love more actionable. So be sure to join us in NYU if you're interested. Like I said, musicbiz.org is the best way to get at information on registration and our full day-long agenda. We also have plenty of things highlighting around Music Biz 2026 coming up May 11th to the 14th at the Renaissance Atlanta Waverly. Thanks to everybody who submitted their ideas for panels on the program next year through our call for presentations. We just closed the portal late last night, and we've got over 300 submissions to build a program out of. We're really grateful to everybody who contributed. Next up, though, we're looking to hear from y'all on who should receive awards during our 5th annual Busy Awards ceremony. That'll be taking place on the Wednesday night of the conference. There are 9 crowdsourced categories for you to nominate your colleagues, peers, whether they're a company or an individual professional who's doing good work in our industry, those who are advancing the business of music, and those who are making our industry a better place to work. So right on the homepage of musicbiz.org is the best and easiest way for you to access the submission forms and nomination criteria for our 2026 Busy Awards. Finally, just a little teaser for you. This is our final fall 2025 webinar, but early next week, if you're on our email list or you follow us on socials, that's at MusicBizAssoc on Instagram or Music Business Association on LinkedIn, you'll be hearing about our spring 2026 webinar series. We're going to kick that off in late January with 8 sessions throughout the spring leading up to Music Biz 2026. We hope you'll join us if you've enjoyed any of our Common Ground webinar series this fall. And very excited for y'all to take a look at who we've got presenting, what topics we've got covered, all of that. But enough from me about future events. Let's turn back to today's event. Really excited to have the team at Audible Magic here to present today. And please welcome David and Andrew from the team. Y'all take it away.
Thanks, Henry.
Thanks, everybody. Dave, you want to do a quick intro for yourself, and I can do one for me?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks everybody for joining. Happy to be here to be presenting today. My name's Dave Nicomini. I'm the VP of Sales and Business Development here at Audible Magic. Go ahead, Andrew.
And I'm Andrew DeWitt. I'm the VP of Product Management and Business Operations here. So we've got some slides to walk you through about the work that we're doing in the attribution space. And I'm going to kick it off with Dave. Here we go.
Yeah. So, as the title of the presentation goes, Attribution at the Speed of Sound, how music recognition technology automates rights management for music businesses in 2025, and obviously shortly coming 2026. So real quickly, high level, who is Audible Magic? Well, we provide advanced audio identification systems that operate at bulk accuracy and at scale. We've been around for 25 years, and our technology has been developed over those 25 years, and we're constantly iterating on it, coming out with new things. Some of those things which we'll discuss here today. The technology is proprietary and backed by 65 plus patents. The technology also operates with 99.9% accuracy and boasts virtually zero false positives. And so when we say that, what we're saying is when we find a match, we are highly confident that it is what we say what it is. And that's really been driven by, our customers needing to know that they can make an effective business decision when they get results from us and when they find matches. The systems that we build are both scalable and reliable, processing billions of transactions monthly across a wide range of customers, ranging in all verticals from generative AI companies, gaming platforms, social media platforms, music-centric platforms, short form, fitness, you name it. We kind of anywhere there's a piece of unknown media, we're able to help. We operate comprehensive databases that are comprised of music, so sound recordings, private databases, which are when a customer has unique sounds or their own sound recordings or something that they want to deliver to us that we can then put into a reference database for them and run matches against. A generative AI database, which is something that we'll get into, or we'll get into all of these a bit later, but a generative AI database comprised of outputs from generative AI platforms and a film and TV database. So the providers for that would be such as Disney, Netflix, so on and so forth. And then, to just call out that we're the only vendor approved by music labels and publishers for three key components: content identification, label content delivery or music delivery, and then publisher clearance and admin on those. So going on next. So database integrity, talking about those databases that we just mentioned, the reference databases obviously contain copyrighted content from record labels, music distributors, film and TV studios, and now generative audio AI companies. The identification is based on high quality match results derived from millions of new assets received monthly directly from first party feeds. So what we're saying there is that every rights holder that's delivering to us is setting up a direct feed with Audible Magic and providing all their assets and their metadata associated with that to us. All those customers sign a content registration agreement. There's a thorough process for ingesting that content. And it allows us to do a lot of unique things with that. And it also obviously ensures trust through the absence of unsourced metadata from, reference scraping or other ways of obtaining that. So everything is coming in directly from the rights holders themselves. And just a few of the partners that we work with, kind of talking to the scale and the breadth of which we work with. You know, talking about the record labels, generative AI companies, again, gaming platforms, music-centric platforms, supply chain providers, and content creation platforms, you know? So yeah, I think that's it for this one, Andrew. A little bit high level, 50,000 foot view on how the workflow or how we work with our customers. So the customer installs the SDK, you integrate the SDK on the client side to access the content identification capabilities. That SDK automatically generates a digital fingerprint of the unknown media file. The customer ultimately chooses what they want to send to us and what they point to that SDK. It will automatically send the fingerprint to our side, and we will return responses back to the customer in real time. So all the services that we built, including the live stream service, are really meant to be real-time services or real-time responses. So you're looking at sub 1 second response time for processing unknown. It can vary in length for longer audio files, but typically it's sub 1 second response times. And then once the platform or end customer gets that response, they can take action. We obviously don't take any action, but it gives them the information that they need to ensure that they remain copyright compliant or enable any sort of monetization, really any action that they want to take. And I think just to call out, the really only thing that the customer needs to do is install the SDK. Everything in the middle kind of happens automatically. And then again, they can make an informed business decision and take the appropriate action that they want to.
I would just add in one more thing here too, which is I think, worth noting that, you know, as you can see here, the platforms themselves are installing our SDK, and so they're willing participants in this process to engage and scan all of their media. And as Dave noted before this, the rights holders that are sending us their content are all first-party source feeds. So really everybody in the ecosystem within which we work, is kind of leaning in and engaged in this. And so it's all happening, sort of as with willing participants where we're kind of the intermediary helping to enable all of this.
Great. Okay, so the problem with altered and AI modified audio on platforms. So now we're just going to talk a bit, kind of scope the problem here and talk about a little bit about the issues that we're facing today as an industry. So a lot of this everybody is probably quite familiar with because I'm sure everybody on this call is dealing with these problems in one way or another, or all of these problems at some point. But obviously the explosion of modified and AI audio, all the things that we typically see, sped up, slowed down, pitched, remixed, mashed up, AI covers, all the things that we are dealing with, and it's kind of the ever-growing segment things. A little comment from Billboard that 30 to 40% of all music on social media is now manipulated. And a recent stat from Deezer, which I know was upgraded from an earlier report they put out earlier in the year, but they're saying now that 34% of all new uploads are fully AI generated, reaching about 50,000 tracks per day. The rights ownership and attribution confusion. So AI models trained on catalogs without clear licenses. It's led to major label lawsuits against these AI music platforms that everybody, I'm sure, is aware of. And then Sony Music requesting takedown 75,000 plus of AI generated deepfakes, mimicking marquee artists. So obviously labels and rights holders trying to protect their artist and their artist rights, name, likeness, all that sort of fun stuff. Revenue leakage and streaming fraud, another major issue. AI has really made fraud scalable when you can create sounds and music at such incredible speed. They use these generators to mass upload tracks, run streaming farms, bot farms against them, and ultimately siphoning royalties from legitimate artists. Again, Deezer reporting 70% of these streams of AI-generated music on its service are fraudulent and has started blocking those payments on those plays. And just another quick fact, generative AI music projected to reach 20% of streaming revenues and 60% of music library revenues by 2028. And so it just goes to show the scale of this issue and how we need to tackle it today to make sure that real artists are still getting paid, rights holders are still getting compensated for when their works are used, and not letting this problem get completely out of hand. Okay. So a little bit about what the industry needs now, right? As this AI generated content proliferates and it scales, what do they need? Trusted, scalable audio intelligence infrastructure that can identify content, confirm ownership, enforce rights, prevent fraud, and enable licensing. So all the things we just kind of talked about, right? And so reliable identification of modified and AI generated audio, the ability to detect all of those pitch shifted, sped up, slowed down, all that modified audio, AI covers, clone voices, synthetic stems, partial matches, short form audio. These things almost work when the audio is heavily manipulated. These are all not necessarily new problems, things that we've been dealing with for a while, but again, this problem is ever growing and becoming more prevalent. Rights-aware usage rules and automated compliance. Platforms need automated logic, right? You're really trying to answer the question, can this sound be used here by this user and in this context? So this includes things like geography or territory rules, territory-specific rules, monetization eligibility. Do I block this? Is it allowed to be used? Can I monetize it? Those sort of things. Platform-specific environments. So, business rules that are specific to a unique or individual platform. And again, that kind of speaks to the first-party business rules. And it also speaks to getting those first-party feeds. It allows rights holders delivering feeds to us to set those business rules on a platform-by-platform basis, which enables more monetization opportunities. It also gives more control to the rights holder at the end of the day and keeps platforms in compliance. Fraud and abuse prevention systems, detection of streaming farms, synthetic music spam, identity theft content, all the things we just kind of talked about. And then obviously automated takedowns and stay downs, some throttling or demonetization before payouts are triggered. Next one, Andrew. So new licensing models built for short form, UGC, AI, gaming, live shopping, all the things. Micro licensing models, these things need to happen in seconds, not in minutes. And that's where, again, those business rules kind of really come into play. You can have tiered licensing based on personal use, UGC, commercial or brand use. And then, of course, the AI training and AI output licensing frameworks that are starting to take shape and deals that we're starting to see in the industry now. So again, this is really important because this is where you're moving from a potential cannibalization of royalties to monetization and finding ways where people can be fairly compensated and put this content in a place where it's compliant and monetizable. And then lastly, a neutral infrastructure layer. So not necessarily owned by any one specific platform, but something that's interoperable and a trusted infrastructure connecting all of the parties involved, labels, publishers, streaming platforms, social media, gaming engines, the AI generative platforms. It streamlines things for everybody. All of these parties on the rights holder side, they can set rules, deliver these feeds to us. It kind of gives them one point of contact to work with, to set business rules, somebody that they've worked with a long time, hopefully. Many of our rights holder partners we have. And then the same thing for platforms, where we have a large breadth of the rights holders that have registered their content with us, that do want to protect their copyright, and can come work with us. And that way these rules are consistent and they don't change from one ecosystem to the other. So just, go ahead, Andrew, unless you have something to add.
No.
Okay. Benefits of automation, right? So by identifying copyrighted content before it enters the distribution pipeline, these are all things I think that we know, but for supply chain in particularly, you can avoid strikes, takedowns, royalty callbacks, stay compliant with the DSP standards that have been coming out more regularly and more in force, changing the way that the supply chain works today, in my opinion. And then, on the DSP or platform side, you can preserve brand trust and identity and identify repeat offenders early. Okay, I'll
All
kick it
right.
over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, Dave outlined high level what we do, the problems that we're sort of focusing on that are very prevalent today. I want to talk a little bit about some of the technology that we've developed to help address these problems. Um, and really, we do a lot here at Audible Magic, and there's a lot that we won't cover today, but the core of our approach to the issues that Dave outlined are kind of focused around these four key areas here. Our audio identification is sort of our core underpinning technology that's been market leading for 20 plus years and continues to evolve. Um, Broad spectrum is really focused on manipulated audio, pitch and tempo, and rate shifted, which we'll talk a little bit about. And that's an enhanced feature of the audio identification. Version ID is a whole new service we've launched recently that's all about covers and derivatives and live recordings. And then our most recent initiative is around our generative AI scan, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. So these are kind of some of the flagship feature sets within our rights administration on the content identification side in particular that we're going to go into a little bit more detail on. So we'll start with broad spectrum. And as Dave noted, it's estimated something like 30 to 40% of music on social media is manipulated in some way. And we know that, those types of platforms in particular, are very popular places to distribute manipulated media. And it's not all necessarily nefarious either. There's obviously all sorts of different use cases where this comes up. It can be a creative tool for users who are just trying to do something fun and different. They don't even necessarily know they're doing something that might be, using somebody's copyright in a way they shouldn't. And then there are others who are using manipulations and modified audio as a way to evade copyright detection and get more views and monetization through other means. Both are true. The point is that it's happening, a lot, especially in social and some other areas too. And so our broad spectrum technology we developed specifically with this issue in mind. And it's all about identifying modifications in tempo and in pitch and in rate, and to do so in really extreme circumstances. So you can imagine, all the different permutations of this from somebody um, changing the tempo, slowing it down or speeding it up, but keeping the pitch of, the vocals and the melody and the harmony all the same. The opposite of that could happen where they're pitch shifting but keeping the tempo the same. And then, see a lot of straight ahead rate shifts as well, in maybe less sophisticated cases where it's just a simple speed up and slow down where the pitch and the tempo go up and down. And, by default, we're sort of, taking a wide view on this, detecting everything from a negative 35% manipulation up to a plus 50% in any of those parameters that we talked about. And it's configurable because we do see, different characteristics on different types of platforms. And so, you may see in social media more extreme ranges, whereas in something, where there's maybe DJ mixes happening, it might be a little more subtle, to help just make the necessary changes for beat matching and transitions and things of that nature. And so, we do work with a variety of platforms, and so we take a view on each of those that's not a one size fits all necessarily, and tries to accommodate and account for the different characteristics. But really, this is helping to fill like an important gap historically that wasn't necessarily being addressed in the UGC space in particular, because a lot of this stuff was getting through uncaught. And so this is key for both, the rights holder partners to make sure that their copyrights are being properly managed, whether it's for blocking or monetization and reporting. And similarly for the platforms who we work with to make sure that they are managing copyrights in a way that's compliant with their law or with the licenses. So um, that's an important one. Moving on to version ID, this is a more recent product that we brought to market. And I think everybody knows, there are so many cool creator tools out there now that it can do some really advanced things. And it's a ton of fun for people that, like to play with these tools. And it also removes a lot of barriers to entry for being able to just do things with music in ways that you couldn't before, especially on the user-generated side. And we're talking about, covers, rearrangements, derivatives, remixes, all that kind of stuff. Um, and version ID is really brought to market to help address this because the proliferation of these manipulations are becoming just, very prevalent all over the place. And in a lot of cases, they are getting changed, beyond a point where a one-to-one audio recording match, is doable or is, like high enough confidence, I guess you can say. So this helps cover the sort of other things. And what we're really talking about are things that kind of sit outside the traditional supply chain. So the traditional supply chain being these are the official recordings that are being released by a rights holder. They get registered, with us or others for one-to-one recording matching. And there's a lot of stuff now that's sort of getting created and released outside of that. And so this really helps account for that swath of music that has copyrights in it, whether it's, a composition publishing copyright in addition to a sound recording right, or in the case of just covers, the publishing right, there are rights there. And so a lot of that just was not being addressed historically. So version ID, helps address this gap. It helps to block more unauthorized content. In the case of the cover versions, historically, this would be really helping publishers in that case, and hasn't necessarily been an option um, in a scalable way before. Um, Also, there's the licensing piece, which I think ultimately, is sort of what everybody would like to see more of, and just, more music use with rights holders getting properly paid and attributed, and good user experiences on the platforms. So this is really a next step in enabling that. Historically, with the recording owners, which we continue to do, but now also opening up new opportunities for publishers and PROs in here as well. And then we've seen some really interesting use cases with this technology, not just on the rights administration fronts, out in the wild, but within rights holders' catalogs to help with clustering and improved ISRC to ISWC linking. So there's obviously a lot of great methodologies out there that leverage metadata, to do this. But sometimes there are cases where the metadata just, isn't able to make a strong enough connection. And so by looking at the characteristics of the music itself and what shares the same underlying composition effectively, this can help improve, enhance the work that's being done in that area as well. So this is a really exciting one. I think that's sort of really addressing a whole new area for the ecosystem. And then to talk a little bit about our generative AI program, which is very new. And the highlights are, this is a voluntary program. It's really designed to identify tracks that are made by generative platforms that get out into the wild. And just like Dave was talking about at the beginning, this is a program designed to leverage our trusted technology and to do so in a way where we're working voluntarily with the generative platforms directly. So these are all, again, willing participants in here that want to participate in the ecosystem for a variety of reasons, whether it's for transparency reasons or to help enable licenses that are being done. There's a whole host of them. But the way that it works is that platforms essentially fingerprint and register their AI generated audio at the moment that is created. And there's a pipeline that feeds directly into our registry so that as it's created, it gets fingerprinted and registered before any downstream, tampering or anything can happen. And this is, really an extremely clean and robust and ultimately definitive way to identify this music out in the wild. We know exactly what this thing is because it's getting fingerprinted. It removes the guesswork out of the equation. And so this is ultimately there to help, streaming services, distributors, and anybody else downstream to identify which songs were made with AI from the participating platforms. And so it really helps to promote transparency. Like I mentioned, we are seeing licenses being done now, which I know many of you have read about. And these are key components to help make sure there's sort of a trusted, neutral way for this media to be able to be monitored and identified and classified in whatever way makes sense given the business context of the particular platform or place where it ended up. So this is something we're extremely excited about. We announced our first partner, which is Udio, in this platform earlier this year. And so, we have an integration with them to be essentially fingerprinting the outputs, registering them with us directly, and incorporating, our content identification technologies into other parts of their work streams as well, so that there's really a good, strong sense of the rights that are coming in and out of the platform and how they make their way downstream. So this is something that we're very, very excited about. And I think, complements other efforts that are taking place in the industry to combat this problem from multiple angles, because I think it's ultimately, a suite of technologies that'll be required to manage this the right way. And this is our approach, which, fits in with, I think, a high trust, high confidence kind of model. So those different technologies which I just spoke about can all be leveraged against the various databases that we have. And we work with a variety of different rights holders and rights types. As Dave mentioned, we're getting millions of new assets every month coming in. It's all first-party data. That's sort of our ethos, is working directly with all of the parties involved in the ecosystem. And we have our music database, which we're now sort of differentiating a little bit more specifically as copyrighted music database. And this is, copyrighted tracks from traditional record labels and music distributors that comes in, and we have that as its own class of database that can be used with any of the technologies that I've went through right before this. As Dave mentioned, we have private databases, which are separated out, and those are cases where platforms have specific content that they might own that's not otherwise publicly released, or for takedown, stay down purposes to stay compliant with Article 17 or other laws, of that nature. Our generative AI database, which I was describing right before this, is again classified separately and kept separate. These are not something that we've decided to sort of commingle with the copyrighted music, because I think for a variety of reasons, it makes sense to sort of have it as its own standalone set of music and assets. And so that's the piece we're working on and classifying separately. And then we have film TV as well, where we work with film and television distributors. So all of these can come together for rights administration, depending on the needs of the rights holder and the platform. So that's sort of the overview of the technologies, that we are leveraging to address some of the problems that Dave outlined at the beginning. I wanted to just take a couple slides to sort of put it all into context for how this ultimately gets packaged and sort of brought out to the market and what those solutions look like. And looking at that through the lens of, licensed use cases where licenses have been done between rights holders and platforms for the use of music. Inevitably, there, are a few cases where a platform has licensed the world's music. And so when you talk about licensed scenarios, there's inherently some combination of licensed and unlicensed music that needs to be accounted for. So just as a part of that, I think Dave mentioned early on, we, in addition to the content identification work that we do, we also provide catalog delivery services to licensed platforms by way of the first party feeds that the rights holders send us under the registration and license agreements in place, that we can then pass along to platforms and essentially tell them, based on the licenses that you have on the publishing and the sound recording side in these territories, here's the music that you can use. And so we handle that whole sort of process for them from the from the catalog building, telling them what's actually available in each territory, and the backend reporting of that, which sort of ties into the content identification pieces in particular when we're talking about trying to monetize assets in places where both user-generated content and licensed catalog are applicable. And so that's really what this is simple diagram at the top is showing, is that this kind of all these technologies come together into a comprehensive suite of rights administration services with content identification and music and catalog delivery kind of all under one roof. And so the rights holder feeds come in from the first party sources with our rights holder partners, and it gets managed in the Audible Magic content administration backend, and ultimately powers the in-app music libraries for licensed catalogs. And then, the same rights view can be looked at to help manage the UGC content identification as well. So the whole idea is that really, this is taking all the back office rights management work off of the platforms and helping to simplify things for the rights owners as well, so that the focus there can be on rights holders and platforms doing innovative licenses and the platforms helping to enable great user experiences, with the rights holders trusting that all of the nuances with how the content is ingested, the different commercial model types and deal types and platform specific use cases, all of that can be managed by a trusted vendor who's really focused on that. So we kind of marry that piece with the content identification at scale, and I think it's important to call out that it's important for us to be striking the right balance between obviously offering technologies like we talked about earlier that can address all of these new use cases. But the key thing is being able to do that at scale, and to do that, when we're talking about billions of transactions every month, so that you have a commercially viable way to offer this to the market, so that these things can actually, be put into place and implemented. So, we've kind of married that with the music delivery, scaling the UGC piece, and helping all these platforms and rights holders make sure there's a clear view on what's licensed, what can be monetized, what's not, and what should be blocked and not get delivered in with the catalog delivery, and to do so on a territory by territory basis. And so to round that out, we have a portal that we make available to our rights holder partners to help manage rights on the different platforms. And then the final piece of the puzzle is the reporting on licensed uses back out to the rights holders for each specific deal that's in place. So some cool things that, that kind of put this attribution in the comprehensive view, and really kind of take it to the next level, are how you can start to combine, what's happening on the UGC content identification front with what's happening in the library of licensed catalog that's getting delivered. And so, this sort of single managed view on the rights for a particular platform helps to do things like cross-promoting, uses of music. So this can really be helpful in recommendations where it will enable the ability to identify that this track from this artist is getting uploaded a lot in UGC and shared, a lot by different users. And we can say, hey, platform, these are all the same things. And this is also the same as this asset from the same artist that's been delivered in your catalog that you're promoting, in your user library. So you can connect all these. You should cross-promote these posts and start to really generate, more views, more monetization on these in the licensed use cases. Start promoting this track that was identified in UGC within the user library, so you can, really double down on the engagement that we're seeing here and just get ahead of the trends as they're happening. Really use the signals from UGC as a means to help promote more in-app usage as well. There's also opportunities for things like song swaps, where when stuff's getting blocked in UGC because it's not licensed for whatever reason, maybe it's a restricted artist, maybe it just doesn't have UGC rights, whatever it is, there can be clear ways to say, well, here's other music that's from this same artist, or maybe it's another version of this song that is available, or other music from this same label, similar sounding tracks, whatever it might be. There's different ways to approach it, but Um, again, when there's that connection between the UGC catalog and the music library catalog, there's a lot of opportunities for really just ultimately trying to unify the experience and use common identifiers across that view to help make for a better experience overall for these platforms and for the rights holders and to get more music that should be monetizable um, into the hands of users and to be generating usage and royalties back into the ecosystem. So I think that's, yeah, kind of the key pieces on how it all comes together. That's sort of all we had prepared for today. Dave, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add in as a final word on all of this.
No, I think that's good for the presentation part. I think we're good to move on to the Q&A section.
Thank you so much, Andrew and David, for spending time with us today and walking through Audible Magic's offerings with everybody. Really appreciate it. And folks, thank you so much for attending. We've got a lot of questions between the chat and the Q&A, so we'll get to as many of them as we can before the end of the hour. Again, appreciate y'all being here today. First question comes from Caroline. Is there any technology to identify works that have quote unquote inspired Gen AI outputs?
Inspire Gen AI outputs. Do you have a little clarification on or an example of what that might look like? Or I don't know if Dave, you had a thought there.
I mean, it sounds like we're talking about attribution from the input side, right? And then like attribution on the output. So what is the question then? This is inspired by this new output is inspired by so and so inputs. And that part of attribution on these Gen AI models is not something that we're doing. We're not trying to look at the output and say, based on the training data, these are the influences that created this new work. The ways that we work with generative AI platforms on a couple fronts. One, for those that are now licensed or unlicensed, we can scan the actual training data before it goes into the model to check if A, it complies with their licenses, so that content is in there as a verification, and B, obviously they can then clean it or scrub it to make sure anything that isn't licensed that's in that training data doesn't get into the model, right? So that's one way. Another way would be on the user prompts. So as a prompt comes in, whether that's uploading a track or uploading your voice or something like that, we can scan that and see for any existing copyright that exists in our databases. We can return matches, and then they can take appropriate actions on that front to see if there's existing copyright going into the prompt that will then influence the output. And then the last piece is kind of what we discussed here in the presentation, is actually registering those outputs so they can then be tracked when uploaded to all the other various services that we work with, all the different platforms that have our toolkit integrated for identification purposes downstream. So I think that answers that question. I don't know, Andrew, is there any other
No,
pieces
I
on
think that's good.
that?
Yeah, no, you answered it perfectly.
Thanks so much. Folks, as you're submitting new questions, if you wouldn't mind, please using the Q&A chat bar. We're getting them kind of mixed up between chat and Q&A. It'll just make it easier for us to track them all. But as I said before, if we don't get a chance to answer everybody's question today, we will pass them on to the Audible Magic team and get the answers for you. Thank you all so much. Next question is a two-part question, comes from Harold regarding royalty-free loop content, kind of how that interacts with the Audible Magic database. When it comes to royalty-free loop use, is Audible Magic more accurate than YouTube's proprietary content ID? If you're able to talk about that, and kind of just in general, what happens with royalty-free loop content in the Audible Magic ecosystem?
Yeah, great
So
question. You want
yeah,
to go
go ahead,
there?
Andrew.
Okay,
No,
sure.
no, go ahead.
I'll start. You can fill in where if I miss anything here.
Yeah.
Great question. We do have a set of content registration guidelines that we publish for all of our rights holder partners that are registering with us. And in that, it does state it's really important that we are only receiving music that the rights holder owns the exclusive rights to. And so royalty-free loops do pose problems because shared and common audio and gets used across all sorts of different recordings. So um, essentially, we take that out of the scanning workflow when we're looking at these things because it creates those types of problems where you're getting, matches across the board. We do return all sorts of different metrics in our matches that kind of lets the platform understand how long something is matching for. And so the duration of match can be a very good indicator of the confidence of a match in particular. But ultimately, yes, we do look to remove, cases where there's non-exclusive audio that's coming in so that it isn't creating confusing and, seemingly just inaccurate matches.
All right. Our next question comes in from Jennifer. Can the public, that is specifically music supervisors, access the music database to find right holder information?
Um, Go ahead, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's not publicly accessible. The data is for the platforms who sign up for our rights administration services. So for the music that's getting used on platform, we're providing the information about what's being used and what they should do with it.
All right. We have a question from Selena. Are the catalog slash right holders sync rights or mechanical or something else?
Um, So let's see. On the publishing side, where mechanical and sync comes into play, we take in feeds from our publisher partners and can help them manage whichever rights are most appropriate based on the particular platform that's operating under a license. And then on the sound recording side, we work with the DDEC standard and can take in the different commercial model and deal use types, again, depending on the particulars that are at play. So on the content identification side, UGC rights often apply, but we can apply commercial streaming, ad-supported streaming, and others to leverage the deal start and end dates on those as well.
Next question comes in from Nina. You may not be able to answer this, but I'll present it anyway. You mentioned Udio and listed Suno and Stability AI in your partners. Do you plan to partner with any other Gen AI companies, or do you have an ETA on when the Gen AI reference database might be available?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Andrew. So the answer is yes. We're in conversation with, all of these ones that are up there that are some of them are existing customers, today for the use cases that I kind of mentioned earlier. And so we're pushing forward on the registration conversation there as well. Udio just being the first one. As far as Udio goes, they are actively registering content today. We kind of kicked that off last month. And so we expect sometime, I don't want to speak ahead of, Andrew here, but I think Q1 next year, we look to get that database up and running and start actively identifying those outputs that are in that database.
All right. Our next question comes in from Teddy. Are you able to speak on attribution technology for the input stage of Gen AI music? Does Audible Magic do this for Udio? Does Udio do this themselves?
I think we can speak generally, not about specific platforms. But yes, I mean, our fingerprinting technology, as Dave outlined earlier, is available to be used in sort of any of the points of entry for content coming in. So there are cases where it makes sense to be scanning training data. There are cases where it makes sense to be scanning the user prompts. So instead of a text prompt, actually uploading an audio file and say, make me something new like this. And so, both of those cases, we have put our technology into play, and I think we just, can't get too specific around other than that.
Thank you for that. You might have answered this question in part before, but this question comes from Tom. Is your fingerprinting used on the way into Gen AI? That is in relation to apportionment or attribution of training data, or in relation to outputs, which I expect is hard to correlate and input copyrights, or both? If so, how does it work on the output side?
Yeah, I mean, we're not, again, we're not looking at the outputs and saying this new output was, informed by X, Y, and Z rights holders and trying to attribute in that way to say, okay, 30% is this, 40% is that. I think we just talked about the different ways we're working on the various inputs and the training data side. But we're not trying to do actual attribution on the output in the sense that, trying to determine the influences. I mean, that's a very difficult task, and it takes deep integration with each individual platform to do so. And you have to be deeply integrated in the model to into each individual model has to have constant updates every time those models are updated to kind of understand how that output got to where it is, right? What was informed in the input process to then get to that output. And so that's not a problem that we're currently tackling today. Certainly we are thinking about it, but we aren't tackling that issue today.
That said, I don't think we talked a whole lot about actually scanning the outputs for essentially regurgitations, and that is something that's happening as well. Because while these models are great, there are certainly cases where stuff sometimes just kind of comes out from the training set wholesale. And regardless of whether or not the training set was licensed or unlicensed, there can be a need to want to know that. And so whether it's a regurgitation of the actual recording itself, where an audio ID match makes sense, or spitting back out something that's reusing lyrics in wholesale, where a version ID detection might make sense. That's another point of identification that we have in place, in different cases.
Thank you for that. Our next question comes in from Ron. And Ron, let me know if I'm butchering your question in any way. We talked about fingerprinting for Gen AI, but more in a general sense, watermarking here. Watermarking, fingerprinting might be somewhat similar. Did watermarking, audio or video, ever gain momentum in the industry? Does your technology use watermarking strategies?
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation that's becoming ever more prevalent. I mean, I think, without getting into too much detail, we're certainly looking at it, and I think to tackle the problem of generative AI, you're going to need a multimodal approach. It's not just going to be fingerprinting alone that's going to solve this issue. And so we're looking at, essentially a tech stack that can help facilitate the identification and the tracking of this content as it moves through the ecosystem. And so I think, watermarking is becoming a revitalized conversation in technology that is included in that stack, right? Where you have kind of a lot of various different approaches, some being just pure AI detection or what we would consider artifact detection. They're just kind of taking a deterministic look and saying, oh, was this generated or not? By looking at artifacts or signatures left behind in the audio files. Then you have fingerprinting, which obviously we do and what we discussed today. Then there's watermarking, which is kind of another ancillary track or path to fingerprinting. And then you have the attribution model, which we've gotten some questions on here as well, where you're deeply integrated into these models and trying to understand the input to the output correlation and how one affected the other. And so, I think there's room for all of these things, and they all have their different challenges. And I think that's why not any one of these technologies in particular solves this problem wholesale. It's kind of putting a combination of them together to tackle the issue. Andrew, I don't know if anything else you want to add.
No, I think you said it all. Thanks.
Our next question comes from Susie. How do corrections or changes get made in the database if the rights holder is changed after a song is distributed? Examples of that might be if there's a change in publisher or record label or copyright reversions.
Yeah, that all just happens through the automated feed processes that we have in place with the label and publishing partners. So as changes are made, our rights holder partners make those updates in their deliveries to us, and it flows right through and gets updated as it comes in.
Great. Question from Juan, generally about Audible Magic. Is this service available for individuals or just on a company level?
Cool. B2B currently. So yeah, we
Yeah.
exactly. We sell into major digital platforms as well as rights holders who want to scan, for catalog cleanup purposes and things of that nature.
Coming up on the last two questions here. First one's from Andrea. How robust is your approach to modifications, that being compression, remixing, and the like?
hmm yeah, I mean, it really depends on the use cases, and we have different technologies for different ones. So, general compression, things like that, our standard technology is pretty robust against. As you get into more modifications, we have broad spectrum for pitch and rate shifts and tempo shifts, and then a version ID technology for really more extreme derivative kind of use cases. And so we combine them all in different ways along with different resolutions of lookups. We have various technologies that can detect, make matches at, shorter or longer segment durations as well. So we really bring all those together to address these in different ways.
One more questions, but we do have a hard stop at the end of the hour. So don't worry, folks. I will pass all of these on to the Audible Magic team. So that way we can get some answers for y'all. Last one for the live session today comes from Herman. I know that Audible Magic analyzes audio, but does foreign music, rhythms, or lyrics have any effect on what gets analyzed?
Um, Generally speaking, no, it doesn't. As far as the audio piece goes, it's really just looking at what's happening in the audio, spectrum and the waveform and sort of other components of that. Um, and similarly on the version side, it's taking a comprehensive view on what's happening in the music and the qualities. So it shouldn't, as long as we have it in our database, we have something to compare it to, it can be matched.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate you spending time with us today to walk through everything. And thank you, folks, for attending today's webinar. Apologies we couldn't get to everybody's question, but don't worry. Like I said, I will pass it along to the team. Be sure to check our website for the recording of today's webinar if you'd like to pass it along to a colleague. Hope you all have a great rest of the day, and we will all catch up soon on the next Common Ground webinar. Take care.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks, guys.